everybody. It's me, the Nitty Gritty Yarn Girl. It's Monday night, and this is Twisted Stitches. Thanks so much for joining us. If you have had some time to spend with us over the weekend, I want to thank you so much for being so loyal, and for all of you new fans who joined us who are watching tonight. Thanks so much for participating in Virtual Vogue Knitting Live. You know, they already have the next one scheduled, and whew, I actually packed all the boxes and got all the shipments ready today, after getting the printer situation taken care of. So my goal was to have everything shipped out today, but please be patient one more day. The shipments will go out tomorrow morning, and we do have lots of them, and for that we are very, very grateful. So when I wasn't fighting with HP today, I was meeting with a student and helping her with a new project. Actually, it's her second project, and it's going to be Raina. We talked a little bit about Raina over the weekend, and one of my favorite little one skein projects. Great, simple little shawl, and works up quickly. And it's even something nice for new knitters because it teaches you some of those stitches that you're not used to. You know, we learn to knit and we learn to purl. And then I can't tell you the number of people who say to me, well, I can knit and I can purl, but I can't make anything. Well, it's because you can't read a pattern maybe, and you don't understand what the designer's asking you to do. So I spent a little bit of time today with my student explaining the, I don't want to say intricacies, but the details of this pattern, because it's not really intricate as much as it is detailed for somebody who's new. And in a pattern like this, it will teach you, you'll learn yarn overs, and you'll learn how to knit through the back loop. And I'm trying to think of what else it is in here that you're doing. You're knitting through the back loop, you're yarning over. Oh, now you've got a center stitch that you're working from, because in this particular pattern, you start with 3 stitches and you grow from the center out. You can see your center seam right there. And then you are also growing along the sides. So that's how you wind up with your triangular pattern. Now, sometimes, or triangular shape, sometimes when you're knitting a triangle, you start from the bottom and you work way up. In this particular pattern, you're starting from the top and working your way down. And I love the little details in here, as I said, especially for somebody who's new, because, you know, you're learning a little bit of lace stitch and you're learning your increases. And so what I was helping the student today was helping to understand how that center stitch is so important, where that marker can't move, which is a question that people ask me with Papillon when they first start the Papillon pattern. Why is my marker moving? Well, your marker is moving because you're doing something wrong. You always need that center marker is a center marker for a reason. So explain to her that your increases are happening on either side of that marker. And that's really important to know, and to keep that marker in its place all the time. And as you get to into the rhythm of the pattern, you start to see what's happening there. And here it's pretty clear. You can see your center stitches here. You've got your yarn overs before that center stitch. So you've got a yarn over, then a knit one, then you move your marker, and then a knit one and a yarn over and knit one again. So that's spreading that pattern out right in that one spot. And I'm saying, I'm explaining this to you all who probably understand it, to help you to help people to see that the importance of reading that pattern and understanding what you're trying to create is really important. And the interesting thing with Raina is when you download this pattern, which is a free pattern on Ravelry, there's no picture. So you how do you know what you're working toward? So I'm gonna have to take a picture of this today and send it to my students so that she can see what she wants to create. And what I'll actually do, and you notice when I post pictures of shawls now on my website, there's always a picture of the shawl stretched out so that you can see the actual piece and how long it is and the pattern that's in there. So I'm going to lay this flat and send a picture of it to her so that she can see how those increases, how that center stitch is going to keep her centered in her work. Now this one is all garter stitch, and that makes it a little bit easier. She doesn't have to fool with knits and purls. The whole thing is done knitted. So it's a fun little pattern this is, which what was happening today is mistakes here and there. And we actually met one-on-one. And so I was able to help her and fix those mistakes. But sometimes we have mistakes that we just can't fix. And one of the biggest things that I find with knitters, newer knitters and even experienced knitters who've never learned how to fix mistakes. And so they wind up ripping that whole thing out and starting all over again, or not knowing how to knit back and pick up. So I thought what I'd do today is just take a few minutes and demonstrate a couple of things that might be helpful to you along the way. And the first thing is a dropped stitch. Now, a dropped stitch, as we're knitting along here, what I tell my knitters all the time, because many of them are newer, is when you find that stitch, like all of a sudden you find a loop. If you're not counting, you should be. And one of the things that we do when we have more than 50 stitches is we put markers every 10 stitches, or even every 20, whatever is comfortable for you. And sometimes we have markers within the pattern. So if we have a detailed pattern, we'll have markers that will mark off the beginning and end of a pattern so that we'll know if I'm supposed to have 10 stitches in here. When I'm done with my pattern, if I've got a stitch left over, something is wrong. So I know I've got to work within those stitches that are in the markers. So what I tell the knitters all the time is when you discover your dropped stitch, like all of a sudden I'm counting and oh my goodness, I don't have 16 stitches. I have 15. Look for that loop. It's somewhere. It is definitely somewhere in your knitting. And then when you find it, put a pin on it. And that's where those the locking markers come in very handy. If you don't have a pin, you can use a safety pin. You can use a paper clip. Anything that will help you to mark where you are. So,
got a number of people on tonight. Who are you and where are you from?
We do have lots of people on. Welcome, welcome. I didn't give Paul a chance to do that. I just went right into chatting. I've been full of information all day. And I guess I just jumped right in there. My apologies to everybody.
Look like the knitting ninja.
That's what I feel like, the knitting ninja today. Okay. It's one thing when you have really good customer service. I've talked about that a lot. But it's disappointing when you have good customer service and poor products. Because no matter how good the customer service is, they can't make up for the product that doesn't work. And that's a little frustration we're dealing with.
Bryce Wonders, hiya. Multiple exclamation points. I promise I'm not stalking you. Ha ha ha. Linda Crawford, back from Mississippi. Hello,
hey,
Linda.
Linda, I read your little note today. My heart is thinking about you and wishing you smiles. So let's while we're waiting to hear, we're out Helen Sollenberger. I can see her from here.
Happy Monday from Buffalo. Hope you are doing well. Hope you too are doing well.
I hope you're feeling better too. So we're just talking about dropped stitches here. And who else is on there? Rita Johnson.
Yep, she says, hello, Paulette. Love the troubleshooting segment.
Oh, good. Well, you know what? We're going to troubleshoot just a little bit right now. So let me show you. All right, so here we are with our dropped stitch. Oh, wait, I have to get my crochet hook, my trusty crochet hook.
And Linda Crawford says, thank you, Paulette.
You're welcome. I do read the notes. Believe me, I do. You leave me a note. When you place an order, you can leave a note. Sometimes it'll be how many skeins of one thing, what color you want, can you switch something. But if you leave me a personal note, I will always read that as well.
Pamela Rose Atkins, great instructional video.
Okie dokie. So here we go. crochet hook. You may not crochet, but you do want to have a crochet hook handy. Wait, I just saw something. I have to get up. I just realized I didn't put that in the box. That has to go back. Okay.
Oops.
Sorry. All right. If I didn't find it, if I didn't get it now, I would forget to do it. So this is what my grandmother used to do. Okay, so now my crochet hook is where I can grab it at all times.
I can't do that.
No, you can't do that. I'd like to do that, but you can't do that.
Look.
Okay, so little trick here that I'm doing on this row. Have you noticed? Have you ever noticed when you're knitting how your ends curl? So what I like to do on my ends is I slip the first stitch of every row. So that keeps this edge from curling in. So I'm going to slip my first stitch and then I'm going to knit, and I'm a thrower. So I'm going to throw my hand over my stitches, and I'm going to just stitch over to where my little.
Oh, you're going into Jody Long mode.
No. Nobody knits as fast as Jody. Okay, so let me see. All right, I got to go one more because I have to go in this space. See, if you notice, though my stitches down here, I still have, there's a row in here that has an empty space is missing the stitch. The stitch knows it's got to go somewhere. I'm just not always sure I know where it's got to go. So here it is. I'm up to my stitch. So you knit to your stitch. If you're new or if you're concerned you're going to lose your stitches, if you have lots of stitches on your needle, you might want to put needle protectors, point protectors on your needle here. Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to grab my trusty little crochet hook. And this is where a table would come in really handy, but we're going to do it this way. Okay. So I'm going to take out my little stitch marker. I'm going to put it down here so I don't lose it. Because, you know, you lose these and then you find them all over the house. So
usually in the vacuum cleaner.
Okay, so here I am. Here's my loop. And you'll notice that there are little bars going all the way up. See the little bars, that little ladder there? So we're going to take our stitch and we're going to go into the bar above it. And we're going to pull it through. And then we're going to go into the next bar. And you might need to like stretch this out. Up, see, there it is right there. So I'm going to go into the next bar and pull it through. So what we're basically doing is if you say you don't know how to crochet, you're crocheting right now because you're crocheting that stitch up to the next ladder. Wait, did I get the next one? Or did I miss one? Nope, I got it. Next ladder. Bring it up. Go to the next ladder. Bring it up. And then the last one. And you bring it through. Ooh. Am I on the right? Yep. And now I've got to put that stitch back somewhere. My working yarn is on my right needle. So I'm going to take my stitch and I'm going, whoopsie, almost lost another one. And I'm going to just slide it right onto my left needle. Put my trusty crochet hook back where it belongs and knit. Now, I don't know about you all, but when I knit, I've got my crochet hooks very close by because sometimes you'll be knitting and you'll just drop a stitch and you can't, you'll do this. Now I got my drop stitch there. So, I can struggle with it. I can lift this bar, lift the loop up, hold the bar, and then hook around. But sometimes you don't get the whole stitch. So it's just as easy to grab your crochet hook. Uh-oh, I lost all those stitches off my needle that time. Let me get these back. They just don't want to stay. The little buggers. Okay, slippery little buggers. Okay, so now I take my crochet hook. I'm going to crochet that stitch through, and I'm going to put it on my needle. Now, I also noticed something before when I was doing that. So we've picked up our stitch a couple of times. So what happened before when my stitch was dropped like that? and I picked it up with my needle, with my knitting needle instead. I went that way. So now what's going to happen when I go to knit this stitch right here? If you notice, it's twisted.
Twisted stitches.
It's twisted stitches, exactly. Now, most of us would have a tendency to just take that stitch and turn it around. But you don't have to. You can take that stitch, leave it right where it is, twist it on your needle, and knit into the back of the stitch, and it will be in the right direction. That's a pretty cool little tip. I was so happy when I learned that tip, because sometimes when you have to take out a whole row, unless you knit back stitch by stitch, you if you decide, oh no, that row is, I need to rip out, I need to rip a row, and you take your stitches off. This is what we call an Ellie in our house, because Ellie's ripping her stitches like this all the time. Oh, see, I did miss a row. So now I've got to pull my stitches off, right? So I'm tearing back a whole row instead of taking stitch by stitch by stitch. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to put my stitches back on my needle, but sometimes I'll pick up a stitch the wrong way.
Rita Johnson Cotterman says, wow, that's great.
Okay, so I'm putting my stitches back on my needle and get to the end, and I'll do one at a time. Okay, so now I'm back, and I'm going to start this row over again. I'm going to slip my first stitch, and then I'm going to start my knitting. And as I go through my knitting, I'm going to be very careful to see, did I put any of those stitches on backwards? Because sometimes when I pick them up, they twist. They all look pretty darn straight this time. And you can do the same thing with a purl. If you put a purl stitch on the wrong way, you can just purl into the back of the stitch instead of into the, oh, that one feels a little wonky. Oh, that could be the one, that was the stitch that dropped.
Linda Brio says, so you always pick up drop stitch with right side facing you then?
I do, only because especially if it's a stockinette stitch, I just find it easier to go straight up that row. Now, if it's a garter stitch, or if it's or if you're on the purl side, so let's look at that purl side. See, this is where, okay, so I didn't pick up every stitch here to show you. Okay, so now if I were to go back, I'm going to take that stitch out again to be sure that I pick up every row, not just the rows that I thought I picked up. So really important. So when I'm working on a purl side, you have to be sure that that your yarn goes through, or that you crochet up the front of the stitch for one and up the back of the stitch for the other side, because that knit stitch isn't always purl. So let me see if I can explain that a little bit easier. So I'm going to drop this stitch a few rows back. Okay, so now I've got a purl stitch. So now with the purl stitch, my yarn, I'm going to pick up that stitch so I don't lose it. Okay, there's my loop. With a purl stitch, your yarn has to go in front of your stitch rather than in back of it, because that you've got to have that bump in the right place. So I can pick it up this way. Then
we got the loop-de-loop camera thing.
We got the loop-de-loop camera thing that way.
All righty.
So I did one in the back, in the front, and a front and the back, and now I'm going to bring my yarn to the front. Oopsie. Make sure my needle is going, my hook is in there in the right way, and then slide it through. I don't know if the yarn is giving me a hard time.
it's splitting. I don't know if the crochet hook is not quite big enough for the yarn. So I'm going to support my yarn a little bit better there. So now I put that stitch back on. Let me look at the front. And you see right there, that right here, there's a bump in the front. That means it's wrong. So we got to go back. Because remember, we've got purl stitches on this side. So we have to make sure that when we're putting our stitches back on the needle, we're putting them on in the purl position. Because we're doing stockinette, I have to make sure that I put my yarn in front, like that. Now we turn it, and you see that I have all knit stitches on this side, all purl stitches on that side. Finish my row. Oh, so now this is the row here where we had the drop stitch. Oh, no, that's not it. It's the next one over. Little stinker. And so I would go back now and I would make sure that I have every row of that stitch picked up properly. But I would do it again from the front side because I just find that easier. So Linda, Linda, to answer your question, unless I feel the need to work from the purl side, I will always work from the knit side or the right side of whatever project I'm working on. Now, it's a little bit easier to pick up those stitches and get them back in the right place when you're working on a square or a rectangle, as we are here. Working in the round is not so hard either. Just remember to pull that stitch out. Happens in socks. You can drop a stitch in socks, and that's the person who I was working with today wants to learn to knit socks, and that's why I said, no, we're not going to do socks yet. You're not ready for tiny needles and fine yarn. When you drop a stitch with that fine yarn, if you don't find it right away, it's going to travel all the way down your sock. So as soon as you see it, and that's why it's important to count. As soon as you see that you've dropped that stitch, grab that safety pin and wait till you get around to that part, to that spot again. Put your needle protectors on, your point protectors on, and then find your mistake and bring it up. So that much easier to work on the right side because you can see the pattern better. If you're working on the left side, the pattern is not always as discernible as it is on the right side. Also, if you would just turn for a moment, Paul, and show them the timber run. On the timber run, when I was knitting, there were a couple of times when I was off with my stitches and I had to tear out a row, for example. But now because I had cables in there, I had to make sure that when I picked up the stitches, if it was a cable stitch, I had to create that cable again. So when you're taking your stitches out, when you're working cables, make sure you keep track of where they are. Even if you when you're taking your stitches out, even if you put the cable stitches onto a stitch holder, a separate stitch holder, so that you remember where they are when you're working them, because otherwise your cable isn't going to cross the way it's supposed to. So those are just some tips about picking up drop stitches and finding your drop stitch. And like I said, if you're off in your count, look around. You're going to find a loop somewhere, and it may have traveled kind of like a run in your pantyhose all the way down, but you're going to find it. I can promise you it's there. So any questions that I can answer, any comments on that little tip? Okie
Yep, we got one coming through here.
Okay, that's okay.
Linda Brio says, thank you. Smiling face emoji.
Well, I wanted to show you. So you're welcome, Linda. I wanted to show you something else. Look who's in the way of my project. Hey, buddy, you're gonna have to get up for a minute because I need to use this. Okay? He's like, wow, I thought this was my new blankie. Okay, thank you, Ben. All right, let's go back here to the show. All right, so you might remember the sweater from the weekend. This is the asymmetrical pullover by Noro, and I had it hanging on the mannequin right here on the end. And I did mention that it wasn't quite done. You can see there's a seam running up because of the way it's knitted. You've got short rows, and so you're knitting it piece by piece. So in this pattern, what it calls for at the end is a slip stitch. And that slip stitch goes all the way up the center, the seam of your sweater to the armhole, or the sleeve. So you're going from the hip to the sleeve with this slip stitch. Now, Noro yarn is really interesting because it's got a lot of texture to it, and so you get thick and thin and thick and thin. I'm just noticing something. Look at how similar these two yarns, the colors of these two yarns are. Isn't that funny? One is a fingering weight, hand painted, and this is an Aran weight, also hand painted by Noro with two different manufacturers. And it's so funny how we tend to choose the same colors when we knit things. Actually, the same person knitted both these garments. I wonder how that happens. You can tell where their colors go. I always find myself leaning toward green. I have to make myself knit different colors besides green and pink and yellow. And it's not that I like pastel colors. It's just that I like the bold versions of those colors. So I thought I'd quickly show you this slip stitch because this can be done to border anything. We were talking about that the curly edge and slipping that first stitch in order to eliminate that curved edge in your knitting. Sometimes when you have that, what you can do is you can run a crocheted slip stitch all the way around. If it's a scarf or a cowl, you can run a slip stitch all the way around it to flatten it out a little bit, or even a single crochet. And it's not that hard. If you've never crocheted before, every time you draw or pull a stitch up to fix your knitting, you are crocheting. And so when we crochet a slip stitch, now this I've actually got to the point where I'm on a thick piece of yarn. So I want to make sure that I'm going to go inside here, and I want to find this because I want to make sure that when I create my slip stitch, it's covering that seam because we don't want that seam to show. So I'm going to take my yarn, I'm going to pull it through the loops, or pull a loop through and then pull it through the loop before it. So now let me make sure I find my stitch again because this is asymmetrical. So I'm going to go into my seam right there. I think I'm going to pull this one and that one together. Oopsie, sorry, Paul. And I'm going to hook that through and then bring it through the loop that's already there. And we're going to do one more. I'm going to pull that through and through again. So what that's doing is it's creating this little braid, if you will, going up the border of the sweater. So when I'm done with this, I'm going to probably steam block that out. And you want to make sure that you create it nice and smooth. And let me show you the difference now. I'm going to pull that loop out so I don't lose it. And I'll just show you one more time how the sweater, the difference between this seam and
this seam. And it gives it a little extra dimension as well, because it is raised when you put that in. So we'll just seam block that out when it's done.
Rita Johnson Cotterman says, love that sweater.
Well, me too. And it's a one size. It's a small medium. So, you know, it's a boxy sweater. Love it. I really do. I can't wait to knit one in my favorite color so that I can wear it. And you know, this color works well on everybody anyway. But I want to do something in maybe blues and greens or maybe yellows. So, are we just about out of time?
We went a little over, but it's our network, so
We can do whatever we want, right? Because we're the
That's
nitty
it.
gritty yarn girl. I really wanted to take this time today and focus on ways that I can help you make your knitting better. And I hope I delivered that for you. If there's anything that I can do for you, please don't hesitate to give me a call and let me know. I just want to let you all know that I'm going to extend the free shipping on orders over $50 until tomorrow, till Wednesday morning. So if you decide that there was something that you saw on the show, you're still hesitant about it, I want you to be sure that you can get that free shipping. So rest assured that when you create your order, we will reimburse your shipping for you and get that order shipped out. So thanks again so much for being part of Nitty Gritty Yarn Girl. And I'll see you all next week. Be sure to tell all your friends, share the page, like the page, and we'll see you next Monday night on Twisted Stitches.